Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for making the time to join this Fishbowl chat and be part of this experiment that we have today, where your participation is what makes this chat a success. It's a new format. When the team at the Effies were introducing this topic to me, they said, we never tried it. It's complicated to do because we're in a cinema. But what's going to happen is I'm going to set up a topic, which is adaptability and disruption. I'm going to add a little bit of context, and then I'm going to open the room to questions and ideally a chat, a debate, a discussion between whoever wants to participate. So yeah, we have this topic with a very long name, agility and adaptability. How do we adapt to disruption? And it's really quite important to us. For us at OMD, our claim, what we stand for, our DNA, is about making better decisions faster. So when the pandemic started, when the pandemic happened, it was really time for us to say there is proof in this pudding. We really need to be able to walk the talk and deliver on this agility that we have been promising our clients all along. But before we start, I just wanted to say it feels really, really, really good to be back in the cinema. I'm a huge cinema goer. My wife and I, we used to go to the cinema twice a week, give or take. And then we stopped, like everyone else, concerns about safety of being inside together with others, pre-vaccine. And we saw that the cinema was one of the categories that was the most affected during the pandemic. Because what happens with disruption is that there are changes in the landscape. When the pandemic started, it was exactly at this inflection point in the entertainment industry where other things were happening in parallel. We saw that Warner Media decided to enter the streaming wars alongside Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. We saw that Disney reshifted all of their efforts as a company, especially with the losses that they had in parks and cruises, to focus their energy into the streaming plays. And then that really huge bet from HBO Max in the US when they decided to release every single theatrical movie on streaming at the same time. Huge disruption to the landscape. And of course, consumers' behaviors also changed. And I think this stat says it all. What took Netflix 7 years, it took weeks for Disney Plus in order of subscribers and monthly active users. We really need to be ready for changes to happen very, very quickly. This is from last week. That strategy of shifting every single theatrical release into streaming, well, they reverted back on it. And Disney, who said, we're going to put all of our efforts into streaming, they released this video from Marvel 2 weeks ago, and I think it makes a clear statement on where they want their efforts to be in 2021. Let me show you quickly. So from saying we're going to put all of our energy in streaming to big, bold announcement, betting on the theatrical experience. And this happened in the span of a month. And that is what we want to talk about today. Things are happening and changing so quickly that whatever we know today will be out of date tomorrow. And this happens across every single vertical and across every single category. When we looked at demand in travel and vaccination rates or lockdowns across markets, things happen so quickly that we need to be ready to adapt and act at speed. Because the faster we learn and the faster we act, the more efficient that we can be. When we talked about agility, for us, there are 3 key pillars that fall into that. The first one is having signals, fast, actionable data that allow us to make decisions faster, actionable decisions for ourselves and our clients. Empathy, which will always remain there. which is the need to put ourselves in the shoes of our audiences and understand their needs when things are changing for them as well. And finally, it's just having the bravery to make big bets, to be bold at a time of change. So the first question that I have is, how do we structure ourselves? What are the changes that we have to make as organizations, as planners, as agencies, in order to be ready to adapt to disruption? I can show you a quick example of one of the things that we've done at OMD, very much at the beginning of the pandemic, which was knowing we have these questions, like the ones below me. How do I allocate my budgets? How do I change my media mix? Where do I spend? What do I cut? And what we did was have a client-centric approach where we categorized all of our client base into 4 buckets. And we said, we are going to act based on our clients' needs. So we split it between those that were the most challenged. So it's that business that it's in trouble. And if the pandemic continues to drag, they will go under. We have those businesses that are pivoting, that need to change, and they need to change quickly because their current business model, if things continue, it will take too long for them to return back to normal. And then we have those that rare businesses, but they happen, that grew, that were in the right place at the right time during the pandemic. And finally, those for who the pandemic was very much business as usual. We have some examples in our client base in the tech space. Google is an example of a client where things remained pretty much the same. Of course, they saw a spike in searches, they saw a decline in advertisers, but pretty much no huge impact. So this is how we structure ourselves. And of course, our goal is to make sure that we help our clients, especially those challenged, to transition from challenge to pivoting. So to go back to my initial question and open this initial chat, I would like to hear from you, from the people in the room, on how can we structure our thinking or structure ourselves in general to be more agile and more adaptable as things change. Who wants to start? Let's pick 2 volunteers to set up this first Fishbowl chat. Oh. You guys are on the wrong session. This is an interactive one. Dan, go ahead.
Setting objectives, is that part of, sorry. So how can we structure, I think, so yeah, having more fluid, more agile objectives at the very beginning.
Yeah, I think flexibility in key performance indicators and having the clarity of the things that are going to change. I would say that for me, this is one of the ways. Just to be clear, there's no right or wrong answers here. I think for me, I'm as interested as hearing from you as perhaps you are.
Thinking about Uber and how we probably all would have stood in rooms like this 3 or 4 years ago, and someone equally bright would have presented on, you have to disrupt, look at Uber, aren't they an amazing company? And all their bets would have been on autonomous vehicles, which now look a lot further away than they maybe did 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. So their kind of objectives are built around that, completely locked, and I'm sure they're pivoting a bit because it remains to be a profitable company.
Yeah, 100%.
So I wonder if, they had a disruptive mindset, but did they have agile objectives when they went into it? I'm not.
Yeah, I think
sure.
I think one of the things that resonated from the first session this morning was when Peter from Microsoft was saying, you need to fail fast, fail cheaply, and fail forward. And I think when we think about agility, it is that ability of realizing that you need to test, you need to take as much information as you have, but you need to do it quickly, and then you need to test and iterate and change if things don't work out. And I think this applies to KPIs. In the case of Uber, I would say personally that the other thing that should have gone alongside disruption, it is that human and empathy bit, because what will potentially be the undoing of Uber is that lack of empathy with their drivers and the understanding that their model, their human model, was not working as well as their technology model. Yeah.
Most drivers were very, very happy and they saw significant changes in their lives. So whether it's from a financial perspective or even social development drivers that would tell you that, of course, from a very qualitative perspective, that
Right.
they had been empowered to learn a lot more by meeting different people. The biggest question with Uber and drivers in that case is it's not the lack of empathy. It's the lack of understanding of what that relationship should be like,
Right.
which is still a problem today. Right? Which is, am I an employer or am I part of the company or am I just using the technology? But it's I would like to just ask a question
Of course.
on this. It's to what point agility and output should be coming together, right, to achieve a specific result, right?
Correct.
At what point do we see agility taking too much of a central stage and leading to bad decisions? Because you mentioned testing,
Yes.
right? So testing sometimes will completely dismantle agility and will lead you to be inefficient again. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a
It's a vicious
Exactly.
cycle.
Yeah.
I think that balance is key because, I mean, it's funny. We've gotten briefs that have asked us all together to ignore the pandemic and let's say, just let's pretend it never happened and let's continue with things as they were. And the thing is that without having the ability to access information, digest it, and react to what's happening in real time, it's like, even if we're making okay decisions versus the best decisions, the opposite side of the spectrum will result in a lot more pain than gain. I think I'm thinking about travel and tourism and just pretending that demand sources and demand patterns and trends will remain as is and we can mirror what happened last year. So I think it really varies. I think testing at scale, it's important. And by that, I mean be in line with the size of your business and what you can afford from a marketing point of view. And it's those clients that can make these big bets that are really going to have the longer lasting impact. We know this, but this is not for every single client. And I think testing and testing fast, it's important, but it doesn't apply for every single organization. And I think there's a lot of risk, to your point, in continuously testing because, yeah, it is the challenge with agility. Anyone else want to add to this topic? Go ahead, sir.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for that. I think and very exciting insights. And obviously, agility is a very hot topic in all our offices and discussions here. Though I think one of the main things here that we sometimes fail to recognize that agility is a learning process as well. So, and what do I mean by that is that for pre-pandemic, let's put it this way, a lot of us have been building our kind of like plans, objective, all this on pretty much, I would say, existing insights. This is how basically, our like target market behave, how how everything is kind of like almost common knowledge. The key to agility, in my belief, is to really dig into the insights of today. The world has changed. So we can't really just keep on maintaining our old kind of like insights, our old kind of like, I would say, assumptions. And what do I mean by that? If I look at it, because the way for us to move in the right perspective is by having the right insights. And let me share an example with you on that, what I mean. Today, and let's say we target mothers in certain categories, right? Today, if we see the consumption of media of kids that happen as a result of the homeschooling and all this and what have you, that exposure, the kid is being exposed to way more ads than their mothers, and they are in a way almost directing that decision now much faster than before. So example, targeting mothers might not be sufficient. We were talking in FMB the other day, about like how now the kids are actually demanding that they have their own personalized sandwich. We were just talking with a guy with Yamigo before, it's like, so if I come now, the existing model of McDonald's, the pre-assembled sandwich is not the machine. The kids don't like it anymore. Why? Because I don't want pickles in my sandwich. How can I do that in the machine, and all that, He prefers Subway, for example. He wants to invent a pizza without cheese. Example, so what I'm saying here is that the agility in our innovation and our long-term thinking in our media has to go into that deeper consumer insight. So if I were to summarize my point here is really we need to consistently be in touch with our consumers, see how they are thinking, and based on that, modify our plans and be more agile in a way.
I think I couldn't agree more. I think that's an excellent segue into the next question. And I think I believe the exact same thing. And out of curiosity, I know that you've given back your mic already, but the transition in children's behavior, how long did it take from where you were able to see a significant difference in your data and on these consumer behaviors?
It didn't take much at all.
Yeah.
I would say it didn't take much. I'm telling you, like we had in our plan that whole digital transformation. I said it in my last session. We had it like slotted for 2-3 years. We are now in 4 months into it, and we feel we're behind the curve.
Yeah.
So it did happen very quickly, and I only see it actually accelerating. So we are in a catch-up mode, if I want to say it rightly.
Yeah, I think everyone feels the same way when it comes to information. So the second question that I have is exactly about that. What are the sources? What are the signals that we need to make these better decisions in order to be more agile? And let me show you a couple of examples. And I think I mentioned this earlier. This is a demand map in terms of inbound tourist traffic for one of our travel and tourism clients. And we did, as you do with clients, we did a couple sessions. The first session happened in, I think it was Feb, and the second session happened in March. And if you look at certain markets, like the UK, from the first presentation to the second presentation, we had to change specific data variables based on our dashboarding because we saw markets like UK entering a much stricter lockdown. We saw markets like Israel that were not part of the consideration set opening up. And we saw vaccination rates changing in real time. So when we started putting together our data visualization, our dashboard to say, these should be your priority markets, from 1 week to the next, things have changed. So, oh yeah, and then Qatar showed up all of a sudden. We also started testing this concept of fast start dashboard for our clients, where we take different data sources to have one single view of sentiment, media performance, demand, and other factors which we consider important, like vaccination rates from Johns Hopkins University. And what this tells us is, can we see significant correlations with people being vaccinated and the demand for disinfecting their homes? Can we see a surge in queries? Can we see positive or social sentiment from our clients happening in real time? And I think the more we can aggregate, correlate, and map over time, the more of these insights that we can get. So these are just a few examples, but for us, it's really about having information at our fingertips that talk about the landscape today versus the landscape 4 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, which is the way we used to operate. I remember in my previous life when we were putting strategy presentations together and my junior strategy would come and say, Ale, is 2019 data okay? I was like, yeah, that's fine. It's like, it's only a year ago. Today, we reach a point where we're looking week by week. We're living month by month. And this is one of the key things for us that will allow us to deliver on this agility promise. So that is my second question. what type of information makes sense? What do we need? I'll open up again, and I think I'm gonna call on Claire. Claire also works at OMD, and Claire, I'm curious because you work on engagement. So while we're talking demand, media, what are the type of data that you need from a creative point of view in order to be more agile?
Okay, I think it's a great question. And I think based on what we've been speaking about in terms of the topics, I think there's an interesting connection that we've already been speaking about. And when we talk about agility, I think the interesting fact is we bring up Uber, right? And agility for me comes very much from, if you look at startups that have set up methods and measurement agendas and everything to fail fast. I think what's interesting about that is they solved the problem. And when we spoke about media and information changing, I think it's as important to look at how information is changing and even where we get it is changing. So, for example, if we assume that how we used to do media, how we used to do creative, how we used to do content shouldn't ever be the same, then why are we also looking at similar metrics that tell that story differently? So an example being, in shopper marketing, they used to do loads of studies on where people used to look on shelves. So why are we looking just at engagement metrics or reach or impressions or anything that used to basically say, okay, fine, our consumers sort of click through. But we're in an age of empathy where people are doing more behind a screen. So I think it's also really important with agility to start looking at new ways of harvesting new information. And what we've seen in this environment, I think, is the world has accelerated so quickly that even accessing new information has been done creatively. Now instead of just asking people to click through and measuring buying, you're actually seeing heat maps and creatively understanding that actually people were looking at things in certain ways, seeing logos placed in certain situations. So when we talk about what information that we really need to be agile, it's not only harvesting the same amount or mass data faster and visualizing it better, it's also seeking out new information. And I think one of the interesting things that we even listened to in the first session is now on Teams and work from home, people are actually giving up a lot of personal information even just through a screen, which is not the case. So it's a new environment we're playing in. So for me, agility and information is about setting up the minimum viable product, understanding what that looks like, harvesting new information, being able to pull it in really quickly, and then reimagining how we do things differently and not assuming that the same metrics will tell us a different story.
I really like that. I like that it's not necessarily about existing sources of data, but it's rethinking and reimagining where data can come from. And I think if we're saying to everyone that we need to be more agile, I think this reframe of what we should be looking for that is going to allow us to make more creative, better decisions, better dynamic creative optimization, I think this is really important. Anyone else wants to add here? Dan, go.
Not going to negate the importance of data. It's just got me, when you're talking about vaccines, it got me thinking about the pandemic more broadly and thinking of different countries' responses to it. And lots of these countries, so you could take Australia, New Zealand, the UK, EU, America here, would have all been they would have had a lot of information, a lot of data, lots of scientific information. They weren't short of that. That was not the issue. The data wasn't the problem. So how much is it an attitudinal thing? Because some leaders did well and some didn't. And so I wonder if taking the data for granted to some degree, how much of agility is about attitude? Sorry if that's where you're going. And if it is about attitude, what attitudinal qualities are important?
Yeah,
probably like humility. I think you're probably going to say empathy. I think that's important as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And probably bravery. And I think if you look at leaders that displayed those three traits, they probably tend to do I think if Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand probably has those three traits in abundance, and they tended to do quite well. And guess where I'm from, our leaders didn't necessarily have that, and we've done less well. So
yeah, I
don't
think
know if you think that's the point.
you're absolutely right. I don't think you can have this without having the humanity that comes with empathy and understanding what consumers are going through. And I think still today, I go around the street, I go on Sheikh Zayed, I look at the creative that has been created during the pandemic, and I would say 20%, I would say this is so tone deaf. It's like we haven't had this collective shared experience that was traumatizing for most of us. And it's like, let's just pretend that nothing happened. And so I think you need to have the signals from a performance point of view. You need to have those KPIs, those metrics, but you also need to have clear human understanding that comes from putting yourself in the shoes of your customers. Anyone else want to add anything to this point? Roxanne.
So Ale, just to your point, right? Because we always talk about experiences, we always talk about empathy from an OMD perspective, but even the way the consumer or a person measures themselves today, 50 years ago was about how much stuff you had. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it's about how much you're experiencing. And I think post-pandemic, everybody just kind of craved this connection. So it's really about how do we make people feel, right? You're talking about going down Sheikh Zayed and people being tone deaf. They're tone deaf because they don't spark anything out of a person. Why do you think we have Claire leading on the engagement agenda? It's because we don't want to be tone deaf as well, right? Not just to our co-consumers, but also as brand strategists or consultants. It's really about, are we listening? Are we actively listening to what's going on around it? Yeah. But most importantly, do we comprehend what the data is telling us? So again, it's this combination of using your common sense or your gut feel of the facts, but how are you interpreting it at the end of the day?
In general, advertising is the most biased industry out there. This has been researched. Everyone we talk to, everyone that we connect to and interact to, pretty much looks and acts like us. We have this echo chamber where what we think, people tend to agree and say, okay, I agree with that and I agree with that. And it's always been an issue that we haven't been able to truly put ourselves in the shoes of the customer. And you have a middle-aged Uruguayan talking to women in Saudi Arabia, to children in Bahrain, to affluent consumers in Kuwait. And you do this based on the syndicated or active research that you have access to. And I think already in general, we can be a little bit isolated, a little bit in a bubble when it comes to understanding consumers. And with the pandemic, it's gotten even worse and worse because it took us a little bit of time to understand collectively what consumers have been going through. I think that's the last piece of the puzzle for me, which is how can we understand, not our audiences, but people in general better in order to resonate and deliver a better product within this context of agility. We know that category dynamics changed completely, shifting purchase behaviors, disrupted journeys. I purposely didn't want to talk about technology, about e-commerce adoption, but we know that the way consumers shop, consume, game changed completely, all in a matter of weeks. But we also saw that priorities shifted completely in 2020. We saw that a rise on feel-good content, feel-good music, as consumers set to escape their current realities. We saw that consumers also were craving the habitual, going back to normal. This was one of the key priorities for them. And we saw big paradoxes everywhere we looked. When we talked to one of our financial clients, we saw that on one hand, consumers never took better care of themselves. They were going to the gym, they were baking banana bread, they were meditating. And on the other hand, when we spoke to them one-on-one, when we did more qualitative research with them, they told us, we are anxious about paying the kids' school. We're anxious about staying in the country. We're anxious about what's going on with our families. And it's like understanding and having enough data to navigate within these paradoxes and understanding that there's two realities that are operating in parallel at all times. This for me is the other aspect that combined with the data, combined with the structure, the mindset that you set up, that fills that agility picture. So that is the last question from me to you. How do we get closer to consumers? How do we navigate these quick consumer changes, understanding that consumer behaviors are happening very, very fast?
I would say sorry, this is Fadi.
Hi, Fadi.
Hi, how are you? I'd say from my perspective, the answer to this, and possibly the answer to the previous 3 questions as well, is knowing how to formulate the right question. And it's about not what information you need, but how to put what you're looking for in the right question. Because we have data to answer anything in the world. It's just about how do we ask the analyst or data scientist or credit card company or Facebook the exact right question. And that would help us understand people better, get better information, be more agile, and
I think that's an excellent point. I think it starts with, first of all, being curious and having that feeling that we need to know more, that what we were doing yesterday cannot cut it, and then asking the right questions. It's like making sure that we tap into all these amazing sources that most of us have, and I think there's so many sources, free, syndicated, that we have access to, that making sure that we shape and formulate the questions. I couldn't agree more. I think that's an excellent point.
Thank you. I think we've all had those questions who want detailed daily, hourly, monthly report of thousands of pages that no one ever reads, and they don't get anything out of them.
Yeah, that's completely true. I have an ex-colleague that used to put a password on the reports he used to send the client, and one day, 7 months later, the client asked for the password. And I said, okay, there you go. I think I'm making a point here. You probably don't need this daily data. Claire.
I also think the trick is that we need to stop being marketeers, essentially, and go back to just being people. Because, I love the saying of a sort of same boat, different ocean, because it truly is that, right? And I think when we talk about agility, there's also an element of bravery that needs to come in, especially with brands that are leaning into purpose-based marketing, right? If you stand for something and you connect with people, there's definitely going to be other people that don't relate or might interpret it to say, no, you don't understand. And actually, some of the most successful brands that have come through this pandemic have said, maybe we don't, but you do, and we'll help you get there, essentially.
Yeah. Excellent point. Hossam in the back. There's 2 questions.
Thank you.
Hi.
I think it's also a matter of creating a safe environment for people to give you the right type of information. I don't think we can expect people to be open and honest and tell you the true, honest truths without creating a culture or a space that allows for them to open up to you. And I think this goes to say for whether it's your traditional focus groups, that environment is a little bit clinical, or it's in normal humanity, whether it's race or gender. I think creating the right types of safe spaces, as people say, is really important to getting the right type of information from people.
Yeah, I think if you combine what Claire was saying earlier, new metrics, new ways of looking at information, what Fadi was saying around better questions and rethinking about the ways of extracting information from consumers by changing the way we conduct research, no longer around a table or a survey online. I think these are new ways of becoming more agile and more disruptive in order to adapt to change. Osama, I think you wanted to make a point.
What I was saying is part of being agile is taking risks or doing things differently. So I think also there should be a safe environment for taking some calculated risks and making sure that if you fail, to fail fast so that you can test and keep going.
Yes, yes, 100%. I think this I think it's good because I think we're getting into this recap zone where I think most of us are in agreement that the testing is incredibly important, that rethinking and reimagining the way we do things is important. Data is still going to play a huge role on what we do, but the way we interpret it, the way we present it, visualize it, and the questions that we set to answer with them, they need to be better. Any more questions or thoughts on this topic? Anyone in the back that hasn't participated? Or here in the middle area? No. Okay, excellent. So, I'm sure you've seen this. I love this video. And I think when we talked about getting closer to the consumers, understanding what they've been going through and being truly empathetic, I think it's one of the best examples of it. Let me leave you with this. So, things are changing quickly. We're going slowly back to normal. We need to take what we know. We need to make good use of it. So I just want to leave you guys with 3 key takeaways. First one, it's about rethinking, reimagining, and revisiting how we understand our audiences. We know that people's identity, their needs, they will shift in 2021. So we need to understand what is going to stay in the long term and what is going to be temporary. The role of signals and data are going to continue to be crucial at driving our decision making, especially when we think about things like demand identification, seasonality patterns, and understanding overall category dynamics. So this is huge. And then finally, it's about finding the right balance and understanding what are the right moments to communicate tactics, which are still important, and brand messaging and communication. I know we love speaking about full funnel, but the more we understand about consumers, their needs, and what they're going through, the more we're going to have a balance that makes sense for today, and we can plan for tomorrow. That's it for my session. I want to thank you all for participating, making this as engaging as it was. And I'll just leave the floor open if you have any final questions. I think we still have 3 or 4 minutes left. I know it was an interactive session, so you probably already said your piece. But if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer. No? Thank you, everyone.